Aisha stood just inside the tall glass doors of Sterling Enterprises. The sunlight poured through the windows and made the marble floor shine. She took a deep breath and smoothed the neat pleats of her school uniform skirt. Her shoes tapped softly. As she walked toward the reception desk, clutching a thick envelope to her chest, her heart pounded so loud she thought the people around her might hear it. She was only 12 years old, but right now she felt older than she had ever felt before. The lobby was enormous. High ceilings stretched up, and a giant chandelier hung in the center like a cluster of stars. The walls were painted white, and large photographs of the CEO, Marjorie Holt, smiled down at everyone who entered. Men and women in crisp suits hurried past, holding briefcases or chatting on cell phones. A soft hum of voices mixed with the quiet buzz of fluorescent lights. It felt like a world far away from Aisha's small apartment and her mother's hospital bed. Aisha opened her small backpack and peeked inside. She saw the folded papers, school forms, a note from her father, and a letter from the hospital. She had memorized every line. Her mother was recovering from surgery, 300 miles away. Her father worked 2 jobs and could not get away. That morning, he had driven her here, kissed her on the forehead, and said, "Just stay calm and do your best." Then he had left, promising to call as soon as he could. Now she stood alone. Her palms felt sweaty, and she wiped them on her skirt. She thought about the receptionist sitting behind a tall desk made of dark wood. The woman looked busy, typing fast on her computer. Aisha lifted one shaky foot and took a step forward. She had to do this. She had no other choice. Her eyes scanned the lobby. There, by a tall planter, filled with green ferns, she saw a woman in a navy blue suit. The woman walked with confidence, her heels clicking on the marble. Her silver hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and she spoke into her phone in a firm voice. She looked exactly like the photos on the wall, strong, in charge, like the queen of this building. Everyone called her the CEO. Aisha swallowed hard.
Yes.
She adjusted the straps of her backpack and walked across the lobby. She felt as if all the people here were glass statues frozen in place as she made her way toward the woman. Her stomach churned. She swallowed another time, then she stepped right in front of the CEO, and her voice came out in a rush. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said. Her voice trembled at first, but then it grew steadier. "Could you be my mom for 3 hours?" The woman stopped mid-sentence. She stared at Aisha, and the phone slipped away from her ear. For a moment, the lobby noise faded to a dull echo. The receptionist paused her typing. A businessman carrying a stack of folders halted behind them. The air felt heavy. Aisha watched the woman's face. Her eyes were wide with surprise. Aisha took a deep breath and reached out, offering the envelope with both hands. "My mom is in the hospital, and my dad is working. I need someone to sign. My school papers help me pick up a uniform and keep me safe until my aunt comes. It's just for 3 hours." The CEO blinked. She looked at the envelope, then at Aisha's hopeful face. Aisha had never asked a stranger for such a favor, but now it felt like the only thing she could do. She thought about her mother, lying in a small hospital bed, too weak to make this trip herself. She thought about her father, exhausted from his shifts, wanting to be there, but unable to leave. She thought about the forms that needed signing before school started next week. She thought about her heart pounding so loud it hurt. The CEO's mind raced. She was late for a board meeting. She had reports to read and decisions to make. Phone call was about a big deal that could change the company's future. She hardly had time to finish her coffee, let alone play mom to a stranger. Yet as she looked at Aisha's eyes, she felt something shift inside her chest. The girl wore a bright pink hairband and had smudges of dirt on her shoes, a small sign of childhood. She had hope in her voice, trust shining through her trembling. Question. The CEO glanced at her phone, still resting against her shoulder. She thought of stepping aside and walking away. But then she remembered her own childhood, growing up with a single mother who worked 2 jobs. She remembered missing her mother one morning and crying on the front porch. She remembered a kind neighbor who offered to stay with her for a few hours. She remembered how that small kindness had meant the world to her. She looked back at Aisha and sighed softly. The crowd in the lobby seemed to breathe again. The noise of footsteps and conversations returned. The receptionist continued typing. The businessman moved on with his folders. But between Aisha and the CEO, everything changed. Marjorie Holt knelt down so she was at eye level with Aisha. She reached out and placed a gentle hand on Aisha's shoulder. Aisha felt warmth spread through her hand. Her heart, which felt like it would burst out of her chest, settled just a little. She looked up, her hope shining brighter than fear. Marjorie smiled, a small but real curve of her lips. "I can do that," she said. Her voice was soft but sure. Aisha's eyes lit up. She handed over the papers and the envelope. "Thank you, ma'am," she whispered almost too softly to hear. "Thank you so much." Marjorie stood up and brushed dust from her suit. She offered her arm. Aisha slipped her small hand through it. Together, they walked toward the reception desk. Aisha held the envelope tight, feeling safe for the first time that day. Marjorie kept one eye on the papers and the other on Aisha's face, where she saw a mix of relief and gratitude. In that moment, neither of them noticed the time ticking away on the big clock above the lobby. They reached the desk. Marjorie greeted the receptionist with a polite nod and asked if she could sign the forms. The woman blinked, but quickly handed over a pen and the paperwork. Marjorie signed each line carefully, her signature neat and steady. Aisha watched her, her small chest rising and falling with each breath. When Marjorie finished, she tapped the envelope, letting Aisha know it was packed and ready. Aisha's aunt would arrive soon. But for now, Marjorie was her mom. The powerful woman who ruled the company had stepped into a new role. Aisha squeezed Marjorie's arm, and Marjorie squeezed back. Neither one spoke again until they were both ready for the next step. But in the busy lobby of Sterling Enterprises, two lives had connected in a single moment of trust and kindness, and neither of them would ever forget it. They left the bright lobby and stepped into a small cafe tucked just around the corner. The air here smelled of fresh coffee and warm pastries. Soft music played at a low volume, and the clatter of cups and murmur of voices felt gentle, like a soft blanket wrapping around them. Aisha's stomach fluttered with nerves as she sat down at a round wooden table. Marjorie slid into the chair across from her, careful not to jostle Aisha's papers. A barista young man with kind eyes smiled and approached. "What can I get for you today?" asked Marjorie. She glanced at Aisha, whose eyes were wide and hopeful. "2 hot chocolates," Marjorie said, her voice steady. "And 1 almond croissant, please." Aisha's face brightened at the news of the treat, and she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Once the barista walked away, Aisha took a deep breath. Her small hands gripped the edge of the table. "Thank you for doing this," she said, her voice quiet. She looked down at her scuffed sneakers, then back up at Marjorie. "My mom. She had to go in for surgery last week. It was sudden. I missed her so much." She paused, blinking back tears. Marjorie reached out and placed a gentle hand on Aisha's. The girl's skin felt warm and soft. Marjorie nodded. "I'm sorry, Aisha," she said. "I know hospitals can feel scary." She gave Aisha's hand a soft squeeze. "How's your mom doing now?" Aisha's eyes filled with worry. "She's better than when she first went in, the doctors say. She will heal, but she can't travel yet. She's in a small-town hospital far from here." She swallowed. "My dad works 2 jobs. He can't take time off to bring me back and forth." He tried, but his boss said no. Marjorie listened with all her attention. She watched Aisha's small throat move as she swallowed back a tremor of fear. "That must be so hard, Marjorie," said. "I can only imagine how much you worry." She offered a gentle smile. "Tell me more about your dad." Aisha let out a shaky breath. He works at a bakery in the morning and then at a grocery store in the evening. He barely sleeps. He said he'd do anything for me and my mom, but he can't be in 2 places at once." Marjorie nodded again. She felt her chest tighten at the thought of a little girl managing all this alone. The cafe around them felt warm and safe, but she knew the rest of the day would be hard for Aisha. "And your aunt?" Marjorie asked. She'll be here soon? Aisha nodded. She's driving from out of town. She said she'd get here before lunch, but the roads can be slow. She looked at the door every few seconds, as if expecting her aunt to burst in. They sat in silence for a moment. The hot chocolates arrived, steam curling above the mugs, and the almond croissant glowed under the soft cafe lights. Aisha's eyes lit up. Marjorie watched her for a moment, then picked up her mug and took a careful sip. The chocolate was rich and sweet. She smiled at Aisha. "This is good," she said. Aisha smiled back, relief softening her face. Aisha picked at the croissant's flaky edge. "I need someone to sign my school form," she said, voice small. "I tried to fax them, but the fax machine broke." She tapped the envelope on the table. "And I need someone to help me pick up a uniform from the shop next door. And I don't want to sit here alone." Her bottom lip trembled. Marjorie's mind raced. She had a board meeting in 45 minutes. She needed to prepare. She had phone calls lined up. She couldn't afford to be late. But she also saw a small girl trusting her with everything. The weight of that trust rested heavy in her chest. She set down her cup and leaned forward. "So you need someone just for a few hours?" she asked softly. Aisha nodded, her eyes hopeful. Marjorie looked around the cafe. Other people were chatting, reading newspapers, typing on laptops. No one here seemed to mind. It was a place for a moment of calm in a busy day. She exhaled slowly. She thought of her own childhood, of waiting for her mother to come home from work, of counting minutes on the clock. She remembered once, when she was young, someone had sat with her when she felt alone. That kindness had mattered more than any gift. She met Aisha's gaze. "Okay," she said. Her voice surprised her. It was gentle, yet firm. "I will help you for 3 hours." Aisha's breath caught in her throat. She covered her mouth. With one hand, eyes shining. "Really?" she whispered. Marjorie nodded. A small smile tugged at the corner of her lips. "Really?" Aisha's face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. She let out a soft giggle and clapped her hands once. "Thank you, ma'am," she said, her voice full of relief. "Thank you so much." Marjorie felt a warmth spread through her chest. She reached out and ruffled Aisha's hair, a simple gesture. But it made the girl beam. The barista returned, placing a small plate of cookies near the register. He offered another smile to Marjorie, who nodded in thanks. Aisha grabbed one cookie and took a bite. She chewed slowly, eyes closed in delight. Marjorie watched her and felt something shift inside her. The world of mergers and markets seemed a long way off now. It's right here, in a quiet cafe, was where she could do some good. Marjorie checked her watch. She had 40 minutes before the forms needed to be filed by the school office. "Okay," she said, standing up. She patted Aisha's shoulder. "Let's get those forms signed." Aisha sprang to her feet, clutching the envelope to her chest like a treasure. They left the cafe together, stepping back into the wide hallway. Of the building, Marjorie led the way, guiding Aisha with a gentle hand on her back. Aisha squeezed Marjorie's hand in thanks. As they walked, Marjorie wondered what the next hours would bring. But she knew one thing for sure. She was exactly where she needed to be. And Aisha, for the first time that morning, felt safe and hopeful in the company of her new, unexpected friend. They stepped out of the building and into the bright morning light. The uniform shop stood on the corner, its glass window displaying neat stacks of shirts and skirts. A small bell jingled as they entered. Aisha's eyes widened with relief. She pulled the envelope from her backpack and handed it to Marjorie. "These are the payment papers," she said softly. "My dad paid online, but I need someone to sign here." Marjorie took the papers carefully and glanced over them. Then she signed with a steady hand. Aisha watched every stroke of the pen as if it were magic. When Marjorie finished, Aisha tucked the papers back into the envelope and smiled shyly. A kindly shop assistant appeared. "Here's your school uniform," the assistant said, lifting a crisp white shirt and a pleated skirt. She handed the set to Marjorie, who folded them gently. "Thank you," Marjorie said, handing over the signed papers. The assistant wrapped the uniform in paper and handed it to Aisha. The girl hugged the parcel tightly against her chest. She looked up at Marjorie. "Can I try it on?" she asked. Marjorie glanced around. "Of course. There's a changing room in the back." She pointed down a narrow aisle lined with racks of clothes. Aisha ran toward the fitting rooms. Marjorie followed at a slow pace, careful not to rush her. She thought about how different this was from her usual mornings. Normally she moved fast, her mind racing with numbers and meetings. Now she waited for a little girl to put on a new uniform. Something inside her warmed at the thought. Aisha closed the changing room curtain and emerged a minute later. The uniform fit perfectly. She stood straight, her hands at her sides. Aisha turned slowly, as if modeling on a stage. The pleats of the skirt swayed gently. Marjorie's face lit up with a proud smile. "It looks wonderful on you," she said. Aisha's cheeks grew pink. She twirled once more, then hurried back behind the curtain to change. When Aisha came back, she carried a bag with ice cream cones. She had slipped them into the uniform parcel without telling Marjorie. Now she held 2 cones, 1 strawberry, 1 chocolate. "I thought we could have a little treat," she said, offering one to Marjorie. Marjorie laughed softly and accepted. The ice cream was cold and sweet. Aisha licked her cone happily, chocolate smudging near her mouth. Marjorie watched her, amused by how even the simplest things could bring joy. They walked a few steps to a small park bench outside the shop. Children played on swings nearby, shouting with laughter. Marjorie settled on the bench and unwrapped her ice cream. Aisha sat beside her, her feet barely touching the ground. She took a big bite and closed her eyes, savoring every drop. After a moment, Aisha spoke. "My mom used to make art," she said, her voice soft. Marjorie looked at her art. She asked. Aisha nodded. She painted pictures of flowers and birds. She said one day she would open a gallery. I used to help her mix colors. She paused, tracing a line in the dirt with her finger. "Never thought of myself as an artist, but she said I had a good eye." Her smile was small, but full of memory. Marjorie listened carefully. She remembered her own childhood dreams. She had wanted to be a writer. She wrote short stories in a notebook she carried everywhere. But her mother told her that art and stories were fine, but she needed a secure job. So Marjorie worked hard, and she became CEO. She had everything she had ever asked for. But sometimes she wondered if she had forgotten her own dreams. She turned to Aisha. "Your mother sounds talented," she said. "Did she teach you how to paint?" Aisha nodded again. "She gave me a small set of paints once," she said. "But I haven't used them in months." Her eyes grew distant. "I wish I could paint her something now." A single tear rolled down her cheek. Marjorie reached into her purse and pulled out a small notepad and pen. She handed them to Aisha. "Here," she said. "Draw something for your mom." Aisha looked surprised. "But I don't have colors," she whispered. Marjorie smiled. "Just draw with this for now." She tapped the pen. "You can color it later." Aisha opened the notepad and drew a simple flower with long petals. She added a bird perched on a branch. Marjorie watched her hand move with care and hope. When she finished, she turned the pad around so Marjorie could see. The drawing was simple but full of heart. Marjorie reached out and tapped the bird. "This is beautiful," she said. "Your mother will love it." Aisha's face brightened. She tucked the notepad back into her bag. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I think she will." She took another bite of her ice cream. The two sat in a comfortable silence, listening to the wind rustle the leaves of the nearby trees and the distant laughter of children. Marjorie checked her watch. She still had time before the next errand. They needed to visit the school office to file the forms and pick up the official ID card. But she didn't want to rush Aisha. She thought about time, how she always measured it in deadlines and schedules. Now she measured it by the slow joy of a child eating ice cream and sketching flowers. They stood and brushed off their clothes. Marjorie slipped her notepad and pen back into her purse. Aisha folded her uniform parcel neatly and held it close. Together, they walked toward the school office. Marjorie kept her arm around Aisha's shoulders, and the girl leaned into her. As they approached the entrance, Marjorie could see the office doors through the window. She paused. "Are you ready?" she asked. Aisha nodded firmly. "Yes," she said. I'm ready. Marjorie smiled and opened the door. Inside, the office was quiet. A single clerk sat at a desk surrounded by stacks of paper. The clerk looked up as they entered. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice polite but tired. Marjorie stepped forward and explained, "My name is Marjorie Holt, and I am signing on behalf of Aisha. We have her school forms here." She handed over the envelope. The clerk sorted through the papers and frowned. "It looks like we are missing the payment confirmation," she said. "We cannot process the forms without it." Aisha's face fell. Marjorie took a deep breath. She remembered how she had prepared for every challenge in business. Now she needed to solve this problem with kindness and calm. She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. She tapped a few apps, opened her email, and found the payment receipt. She showed it to the clerk. "Will this work?" she asked. The clerk scanned the digital receipt and nodded. She began typing on her keyboard, her fingers flying over the keys. Within moments, she printed a new form and stamped it. "All set," she said, handing the papers back. Aisha's eyes shone with relief. She hugged the envelope again. "Thank you," she whispered. Marjorie patted her back. They left the office, the papers signed and the ID card printed. Aisha held the card up to her face and smiled at her reflection. Marjorie watched her, pride swelling in her chest. She thought of how unexpected this day had become. She had arrived to sign a contract, and instead she had signed school forms. For a little girl, she had done something she'd never imagined. She had become a mom, if only for a few hours. Outside, the sun was higher in the sky. Marjorie checked her watch again. She still had time before Aisha's aunt arrived. She wondered what else the morning would bring. She felt a soft tug on her sleeve. Aisha looked up at her. "Can you stay with me until my aunt comes?" she asked. Marjorie smiled and nodded. "Of course," she said. "I'm not going anywhere." They began to walk down the hallway together, their footsteps echoing softly. Aisha clutched her uniform and ID card. Marjorie carried the remaining papers in her hand. And as they walked, Marjorie realized that sometimes the most important things in life were not about profit or power, but about kindness, trust, and the small moments shared between a child and a stranger who becomes a friend. They waited near a row of empty chairs in the quiet school hallway. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, casting long shadows on the polished floor. Aisha's small fingers tapped on her uniform parcel as she watched the clock on the wall. Each tick felt loud in the silence. Marjorie stood beside her, one hand resting gently on Aisha's shoulder. They both knew that any moment now, trouble could strike, but they also knew they would face it together. Suddenly, the office door burst open. A stern woman in a crisp blouse hurried out, holding a stack of papers. She paused when she saw Marjorie, and Aisha then glanced at her watch. "Ms. Holt," she said, voice tight, "we have a problem." Marjorie nodded. She tucked her papers under her arm. "What happened?" she asked calmly. The clerk took a breath. "Your payment receipt shows here," she said, "but our system is not linking it to these forms. We cannot issue the ID card or file the enrollment without a manual override." She tapped the computer screen. "I've tried everything I can. Our IT department is busy with an emergency and won't be able to help for at least an hour." Her tone grew apologetic. "I'm sorry, but I can't complete this for you right now." Aisha's face went pale. She bit her lip and looked down at her shoes. Marjorie felt a surge of protectiveness and resolve. She knelt to be at Aisha's level, smoothing back a strand of hair. "It's okay, Aisha," she said softly. "We'll fix this." Aisha looked up, her eyes wide with concern. "But school starts next week," she whispered. "If I don't have my ID, they will not let me join the class." Her bottom lip trembled. Marjorie stood and straightened her suit jacket. She cleared her throat and turned back to the clerk. "I understand," she said. "Is there someone higher I can talk to? A supervisor or a principal?" The clerk hesitated. "Our principal is in a meeting off-site," she said. "She won't return until after lunch." She sighed. "I can try to email IT again, but I doubt they can help in time." Marjorie's mind raced. She thought of boardroom battles she had faced, hostile negotiations, last-minute deadlines, impossible demands. This challenge was similar, an obstacle that required calm, clear thinking. She took out her phone and typed a quick message. Aisha peered over her shoulder. "Who are you texting?" Marjorie smiled. "I'm calling in a favor." She tapped send. Within minutes, her phone buzzed. Marjorie glanced at the screen. The IT manager, a former colleague, had replied, "On it, give me 10 minutes." Marjorie exhaled. She turned back to the clerk. "Please leave these papers here," she said. "I need to step out for a moment, but I will return with the solution." The clerk nodded and took the envelope. "I will hold them," she said. Marjorie reached down and took Aisha's hand. "Come on," she said. "Let's get some fresh air." They stepped into the hallway and walked outside to a small courtyard between the school buildings. The air was cool and smelled faintly of grass. They sat on a low stone wall. Aisha tucked her uniform parcel in her lap and exhaled in relief. "Watch the clock," Marjorie said. "In 10 minutes, we should have your override." Aisha nodded and leaned against Marjorie. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Aisha whispered, "Thank you for doing all this." Marjorie smiled. "Happy to help," she said. "You have been so brave today." Aisha pressed her small hand against Marjorie's and closed her eyes, as if storing that moment in her memory. 10 minutes passed slowly. Marjorie checked her phone again. A new message: "Override complete. Card ready at second floor office." She showed the message to Aisha. The girl's eyes lit up. "Let's go," she said, jumping to her feet. They hurried back inside and climbed the stairs 2 at a time. On the second floor, they found the office door. Marjorie knocked lightly. The clerk from before opened it, holding a small stack of plastic ID cards. "Here it is," she said. She tapped the screen to confirm the override. Aisha's card slid into view, her photo smiling back. The clerk handed it to Marjorie.
Sure.
"All set now," she said. "Welcome to the school, Aisha." Aisha took the card with gentle hands. She turned it over and looked at her name. Tears slipped down her cheek, not of fear now, but of pure relief. "Thank you," she whispered to Marjorie. "I can't believe it." Marjorie knelt again. She brushed the tear away. "You did it," she said. "You never gave up." Aisha beamed and hugged Marjorie tightly. They left the office, and Marjorie asked, "Is there anything else we need to do before your aunt arrives?" Aisha thought for a moment, then nodded. "I need to pick up my classroom books," she said. "There in the library," Marjorie smiled. "Lead the way." They walked down the hallway, their footsteps echoing on the tiles. Along the walls were colorful posters. Students had made pictures of the solar system. Poems about kindness, maps of faraway lands. Aisha pointed to one poster. "That's from last year," she said. "My class made it." Marjorie took a closer look. Small drawing of a butterfly, wings spread wide, floated above the words "Dream Big." She thought about how Aisha had dreamed big, today dreamed of help when she needed it, and found it. They reached the library, and the librarian greeted them with a warm smile. She handed Aisha a stack of thin textbooks. "Here are your books." "Dear," she said. Aisha carefully slid her new ID card into the pouch of her uniform bag. Then she carried the books to Marjorie. "Could you hold these for me?" she asked. Marjorie took the stack and balanced them against her chest. "Got them," she said. As they walked out of the building, the sun was high overhead. The courtyard was full of students laughing and talking. Aisha paused at a bench near the entrance. She looked at her watch. "My aunt should be here soon," she said. Marjorie nodded. "Why don't we wait here?" she suggested. They sat down together, and Marjorie placed the books on her lap. A few minutes later, a car pulled up. A woman with kind eyes stepped out. She hurried to Aisha's side and wrapped her in a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry I'm late," the aunt said. Aisha introduced her to Marjorie. The two women shook hands warmly. "Thank you for everything," the aunt said. "I can't tell you how much this means." Marjorie smiled. "It was my pleasure," she said. Aisha hugged Marjorie one more time. "Goodbye, Mom," she whispered, using the word they had shared. Marjorie felt her chest tighten with emotion. "Goodbye, honey," she replied softly. As the car drove away, Marjorie watched Aisha lean out the window, waving with one hand while holding her books with the other. Alone once more, Marjorie took a deep breath and straightened her suit. She looked around the school grounds, feeling the calm after the excitement. She checked her watch. She still had time to return to the office and to her board meeting. But as she walked back toward the main building, she knew her morning had changed her in a way she would never forget. She had learned that true leadership sometimes meant saying yes when it mattered most, and that a few hours of kindness could change a little girl's world. They walked to the parked car where the driver waited. Aisha's aunt thanked Marjorie again, her voice full of gratitude. Aisha climbed into the back seat, clutching her books. She turned and waved at Marjorie with a big smile. "Bye," she called out. Marjorie waved back, her heart feeling full. Then the car drove away, its tires humming against the pavement. Marjorie took a deep breath. The quiet air of the school courtyard felt different now, lighter, as if a weight had lifted from her chest. She walked back into the main building of Sterling Enterprises. The marble floors gleamed under her heels. The lobby was busy again. People moved with purpose, their eyes on screens or papers. Marjorie paused by the reception desk. The receptionist gave her a knowing look, as if asking silently how it had gone. Marjorie smiled and nodded once, then continued toward the elevator. Inside the metal box, she pressed the button for the 20th floor. The doors closed with a soft whoosh dot on the ride up. Marjorie thought about the morning. She had come to work expecting to tackle financial reports and board decisions. Instead, she had signed school forms, chosen a uniform, shared hot chocolate and cookies, solved glitches, waited for overrides, and even held ice cream cones. She had listened to a child's story about her mother's art, and she had let herself be called mom for a few hours. In her career, she had learned to lead with strength. Today, she learned to lead with kindness. The elevator doors opened. Marjorie stepped into the hallway of glass offices and open meeting rooms. She passed her assistant, who was typing rapidly at a desk. The assistant looked up. "Ms. Holt, they're waiting for you in conference room B," she said. Marjorie nodded and offered a small smile. "I'll be there in a moment," she replied. She walked past tall windows that looked out over the city's skyline. The buildings glittered in the sun, but Marjorie's mind was still with Aisha and her aunt. She entered the conference room. A long table filled with colleagues sat in chairs, their faces expectant. Marjorie took her place at the head, sat down, her briefcase, and opened her laptop. Presentation slides glowed on the screen behind her. The meeting began. Numbers, forecasts, and strategies filled the next hour. Her voice was steady and clear as she spoke. Yet in the back of her mind, she thought of a small girl in a new uniform and her proud smile. She remembered the drawing of the flower and bird. After the meeting, Marjorie returned to her office. She sat at her desk and stared at her reflection in the dark computer screen. Then she picked up her pen and notepad. She wrote a note. "Dear Aisha, thank you for reminding me what matters in life. Your courage and hope moved me. I am proud to be your friend. Love, Mrs. Holt." She folded the note and slid it into a bright yellow envelope. Next, she opened her drawer and found the small notepad where the drawing lay. She slipped that in, too. Marjorie stood and walked to the mailroom. She handed the envelope to the clerk. "Please deliver this to Ms. Aisha and her aunt," she said. The clerk nodded and placed the envelope in the outgoing bin. Marjorie left the room and headed to the company's charity office. There she met with the director of community relations. "I'd like to make a donation to the children's hospital where Aisha's mother is recovering," she said. They discussed the gift amount and arranged for it to support the hospital's art therapy program, back at her desk. Marjorie sat quietly for a moment. She looked out the window at the bustling city below. She thought of her own childhood and of the neighbor who once helped her when she was lonely. She thought of how that small act of kindness had stayed with her all these years. Now she had passed that kindness on. She felt a gentle pride in her chest. It was different from her usual pride in business wins. This pride felt warmer, more personal. That afternoon, Marjorie received an email. It was from Aisha's aunt. It included a photo of Aisha smiling with her recovered mother. They held the drawing together, the flower bright against the paper. The aunt wrote, "Thank you for everything you did. You will always be part of our family story." Marjorie's eyes filled with tears of joy. She printed the photo and placed it on her desk beside her computer. Every time she saw it, she would remember today's lesson. As evening approached, Marjorie packed her bag. She stood and stretched, feeling the day's tension ease from her shoulders. She typed a quick message to her assistant. "Tomorrow morning, I'll arrive a bit later. I am visiting the hospital to see how Aisha's mother is and to deliver the art supplies and the donation." She hit send. Then she closed her laptop and left the office. Outside, the sun was low in the sky. The city lights began to flicker on. Marjorie hailed a taxi and gave the address of the children's hospital. As the car moved through traffic, she looked out the window at the streetlights reflecting on wet pavement from an earlier rain. World seemed calm now, a soft ending to a busy day. She felt grateful for the chance to help someone in need. At the hospital entrance, Marjorie stepped onto the curb. The cool air smelled faintly of flowers from planters by the doors. She took out her notepad and read the note to herself once more. Then she walked inside, ready to see how Aisha's mother was doing and to offer kind words in the company's gift. She felt a quiet excitement, the same excitement she felt when she first met Aisha. In the hospital room, a woman with dark curls sat on the bed. Aisha squealed when she saw Marjorie. The mother smiled and extended her hand. "Thank you," she said softly. Marjorie gave her the flowers and the donation card. She also handed over a basket of art supplies for therapy. Aisha skipped forward and hugged her mother and Marjorie together. They stood in a circle of warmth and hope, three people bound by kindness. Hours later, as Marjorie left the hospital, she paused on the steps. She looked up at the windows of the ward, where lights glowed like stars. She felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She realized that her true strength was not just in her mind or her position, but in her ability to care. She stepped into the cool night air, her heart light, driving home. She thought of tomorrow's sunrise and the many days ahead. She knew she would return to board meetings, financial goals, and strategic plans, but she also knew she would carry. Today with her, she would remember that a single moment of connection could change lives. She would remember Aisha's brave smile, the drawing of the bird and flower, and the power of saying yes when it matters most. And as she pulled into her driveway, Marjorie decided that from this day on, she would look for chances to step beyond her office walls and into the lives of others. She would let kindness guide her decisions as much as numbers did. In the quiet of her home, she whispered aloud to no one in particular, "This is what leadership really means." Then she turned off the light, feeling ready for whatever tomorrow would bring.